That's right. You gotta have your dreams. But let me tell you something, folks. Be careful about your dreams. Be very careful. Because you see, when you dream those dreams, when you write them down, when you put a date on it, when you list the obstacles which you have to overcome in order to get there, when you identify the people, the groups, and the organizations you need to work with in order to get there, when you spell out what you've got to know in order to reach your objectives, when you devise that plan of action, that game plan to get there, and when you write it down, what's in it for me, when you do all of those things, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to be reaching some of those objectives. I can honestly look you in the eye and say that virtually every major objective I've ever set in my life has been reached. And I honestly believe that the rest of them will be reached. When you follow the steps with firm conviction, when you've made your commitments, when you do all the things we're talking about, things are going to happen in your life. Most doctors will tell you that 90% of the way you feel is determined by the way you want to feel and by the way you expect to feel. Makes all the difference in the world. A lot of times I'll answer the telephone at home simply by saying, howdy, howdy, howdy. Or I might pick up the telephone and say, good morning, this is Zig Ziglar's happy husband. Never will forget, one Sunday afternoon I picked up the telephone. I said, good afternoon, this is Tom Ziglar's dad. A little voice at the other end said, is Tom there? I said, he sure is. He said, can I speak to him? I said, of course, Tom. Youngster thought I'd laid the telephone down. He turned to his mother and he said, boy, they've sure got a weird way of answering the telephone. But I noticed for the next 60 to 90 days, every time I pulled my car in the driveway, about 2 minutes later the telephone was ringing, and I loved to answer the telephone. Little Sam Wing from down the street would be at the other end, and I'd give it one of the little ditties, you know, and old Sam would say, is Tom there? Is Tom there? He didn't want to talk to Tom. He wanted to hear me answer the telephone. You might say, okay, Ziglar, so what? Here's the so what. I can tell you this with as much certainty as I can tell you anything about the game of life. When your child is between the ages of 9 and 15, when they're undergoing more physiological and psychological changes than at any other time in their entire lifetime, when they always change school once and oftentimes twice, when they're subjected to the morality of the media, the morality of the TV, and the morality of their peer group, and the morality of the family, and the morality of the church, often in conflict, when they so desperately need a mother and or a daddy to put their arms around them and tell them they love them and spend time with them, the average American parent, according to the National PTA and the University of Pennsylvania, is spending 7.5 minutes a week talking to their children. Now, I'm not talking about eating with them. I'm not talking about watching television with them. I'm talking about talking to those kids. We discovered that if we created an environment of excitement and happiness and love, that the neighborhood kids would come to our house to see our son and our daughters. And I'd rather have 19 of them in my den and me know everything that's going on than to have my children in somebody else's home where I did not know what was going on. And I stress this in the Born to Win program for the very simple reason that your relationship with your mate and with your children has a direct bearing on your future and on your career. They're all tied together. Man is physical and he is mental and he is spiritual. And unless we deal with the whole ball of wax, we're going to miss out on some critical parts and we're going to be hurting somewhere. The simple process of answering the telephone does make a difference. And then the way you greet people in person. Have you ever noticed the critically negative way a lot of people exchange greetings? How you doing? I'm surviving. How you doing? Fine, since it's Friday. How you doing? Not too bad. Whatever in the world that is. How you doing? Great, since I'm on vacation. How you doing? Well, since I get off in 45 minutes, fantastic. Or as my friend Roy Hatton, who also does a lot of speaking, said, when somebody asks, how you doing, don't you love it when they pull themselves up to their full height and say, well, under the circumstances. You know. Makes you wonder what they're doing under there in the first place, doesn't it, you know? Now, the next time you greet somebody, and when they say, how you doing, why don't you just tell them the truth? Why don't you rear back and say, fantastic, but I'm improving, you know? Or super good, but I'll get better. And you might say, well, now, wait a minute, Ziglar. Suppose I'm not really feeling that good. Am I telling the truth? Why, of course you're telling the truth. You're just telling it in advance, that's all. Why wait for the good stuff? Now you might say, okay, Ziglar, where do you get your information? All right, I can validate it from 3 critically important areas. First of all, from the Bible itself. Jesus Christ said, I thank you, Father, for what you are going to do. Claiming in advance, you see, and that's the key. You might say, yeah, but now wait a minute, I'm not a Christian. All right, if you don't believe all of the Bible, then let me simply refer you to the psychiatrist. Dr. William James, the father of American psychology, said, you do not sing because you're happy. He says you are happy because you sing. That's right. Dale Carnegie said it. You want to be enthusiastic? Act enthusiastic. You know, the first psychology book I studied in school, the author kept referring to, you know, things like the relationship with your mate. And he said simply that if you've fallen out of love with your mate, if you'll go back to courting them as you did when you fell in love with them, that you will fall back in love with that mate. In other words, he's saying take the physical action and then you will have the emotional response to the action. Okay, you might say, okay, I don't believe the Bible and I don't believe those eggheads either. All right, there is still a third source, and it validates again what I'm talking about. That source is infallible, folks, because it's you, your own experience. How many of you have ever participated in team athletics? Could I see your hands in this live audience, please, okay? How many of you ever went out for practice when you just flat didn't want to go out for practice? You ever get out there and say, well, the coach said he's going to can me if I miss another day? Well, I ain't going to do anything. He's not watching me, you know. And you just drag around hoping he won't see you, you know. And then after you've been out there about 5 or 10 minutes, you finally said, well, as long as I'm out here, I might as well get after it. And you really start getting after it. How many of you ever went out for practice feeling awful and 10 minutes later felt fantastically good? Can I see your hands? I want to give you one sentence worth the entire Born to Win program. You might think to yourself, well, you dirty dog, why don't you just give us that? We could, you know, we could have been long gone. Well, the answer is very simple. I don't believe in giving people their money's worth. I believe I got to give them a bargain. And I believe if I do give them a bargain, if I give you more than you had expected, then I believe you're going to tell other folks about the Born to Win program. You see, we literally believe that you can get everything in life you want if you'll just help enough other people get what they want. Here's the sentence. Logic will not change an emotion, but action will. When you slap your hands, you're creating an action, you'll feel better. You can go into your company and literally change the attitude of every person there, change the environment. When somebody responds or asks you how you doing, for you simply to start saying, fantastic, but I'm improving. Or super good, but I'll get better. It is more catching than the flu, the mumps, or the measles all put together. I mean, it really is. Change the way you greet people. And then when you part company with somebody, instead of saying so long, or see you around, or have a good day, that's not too bad. But when you start part company, why don't you look them dead center and say, well, I'll see you at the top. Now, you see, that is far, far more positive. So step number 3, change the way you greet people. Step number 4 to build a winning attitude is you need to set your gyroscope. Now, I don't know how many of you were around to watch Candid Camera. This might have been 25 years ago. It was the original Candid Camera. Never will forget, Dorothy Collins, I believe it was on this particular episode. She had been one of the hit parade singers, and she was standing out in the hallway of an office building, and she had a suitcase there, and the suitcase had a gyroscope in it. And the gyroscope was set to go straight ahead. And Dorothy would be standing there, and some dude would be walking down the hallway, you know, and she'd say, sir, would you mind taking my suitcase into my office? It's a little heavy. And the old boy would grin, you know, and he'd reach down and he'd say, certainly. And he'd pick it up and he'd start walking this way. And he'd try to turn left, And he can turn left all he wants to, but that gyroscope is going to resist any turn. It's going to go straight ahead. Now, I mention that because you see, in every creature on the face of this earth, there is a built-in gyroscope. The young duck is going to fly south even if there is not another young duck anywhere in sight, because God built into that duck the law of self-preservation. Is going to go south. The young squirrel, even if no other squirrels around, will store nuts for the winter. That law of self-preservation is there. Now, man, too, has a built-in gyroscope, but we have complete control of our gyroscope. We were given minds to think with and to use. You can go to the lake shore or the seashore, and you watch sailing boats out there. They're going in 300 different directions, but wait a minute, the wind is blowing only in one. But on the boat there's a human being, and the human being has set the sail, and it's the set of the sail that determines the direction of the boat. Not the way the wind is blowing, but the way the sail is set. You see, the wind is not going to always blow in your direction, but if you set your sails right, in this case I'm calling it a gyroscope, you can keep your life in all phases of it going in the right direction. Please don't misunderstand. That's not saying that you never have your difficulties, but you already know how to get up when you have those difficulties. This is simply building that reserve which gives you that winning attitude. You set your gyroscope by doing this. The next time the telephone rings and you get involved in a long conversation, and you know how some people doodle. They'll sit there and draw a little circle, you know, then they'll put a triangle in the circle, then a rectangle in the triangle in the circle, then a square in the rectangle in the triangle in the circle, and then they'll start their fancy shading, you know, and some of them get pretty good at it. Why, they even sign it so that in case somebody comes along and discovers it, you know, maybe they'll get a high price for it. Let me ask you a question. What is the going price of doodles in your hometown? Now, that's what I call doodling according to Hall. Now, if you want to set your gyroscope, you got to doodle according to Ziglar. And the doodle according to Ziglar is simply this. When you get on that long conversation, just start writing down, I can, over and over. I can lose 37 pounds. I can get along with my mate. I can raise positive children. I can quit smoking. I can quit drinking. I can get the promotion. I can make more sales. Write down whatever it is. Write it and write it and write it and reinforce it. You are setting your gyroscope. And down at the bottom, write the final thing, and I will. Step number 5, if you want to build a solid attitude foundation, you need to feed your mind. Interestingly enough, I have never yet had anybody say, you know, I'm about to starve. I just don't know what I'm going to do about it. Do you have any suggestions? It's amazing, isn't it, that when we're hungry physically, we know that we got to go get something to eat. And yet I see people who are attitudinal-wise starving to death. Emotionally, they're starving to death, and they don't have any earthly idea about what to do about it. I'm going to even point this out there. Many times I have seen people, you know, and they'd say, well, you know, I was so busy yesterday, I didn't even have time to eat lunch. I said, man, pay attention. I said I didn't even have time to eat lunch. I mean, it's a big deal. And when I ask them, when is the last time you ate a good, solid, mental meal? They say, huh? You see, I fervently believe that if you'll feed your mind as often as you do your stomach, then you'll never have to worry about feeding your stomach or a roof over your head or clothes on your back or anything else. Now the question is, who deliberately selects the proper material to put in your mind? Who are some of the people who are doing the things I'm talking about? Well, let me give you a list which I think is pretty impressive. Mary Kay Ash of Mary Kay Cosmetics told me that she never cranks a car until after she's cranked up her cassette recording of motivational material. W. Clement Stone, worth in excess of $500 million, told me that he listens every day to motivational recordings. H.L. Hunt, till after he was 80 years old before his death, listened every day to motivational recordings. Wallace Johnson, co-founder of Holiday Inns, told me he listens every day and reads at least 3 good books a month. Alan Bean, one of the astronauts who walked on the moon, told me that when they were on their way to the moon and on the space platform going around the earth those 59 days, they were listening to motivational recordings. I'm delighted to be able to say to you that at least some of the recordings they were listening to were fantastic. You need to You need to feed your mind. Now, in your home, you probably have a kitchen and a bedroom and a bathroom to take care of your physical needs. What you need in your home is a room to take care of your mental needs. You see, nobody really is worth more than $200 a week from the neck down. From the neck up, there's no limit to what you're worth. And so you need time and space to feed your mind. I'll say it again. You can change what you are, and you can change where you are by changing what goes into your mind. Be very careful. Select the good, the clean, the pure, the powerful, and the positive. Because if you want the good things over here, you got to plant the good things here. Tell me what you want in the tomorrows of your life. I can almost write you a formula, a prescription, that if you'll feed these things in your mind here, you'll have an infinitely better chance of getting them later. You do need to feed your mind. You need to listen many, many times. 16 times is what we believe is required. University of Southern California says that if you drive 12,000 miles a year in a congested area, that in 3 years' time you can acquire the equivalent of 2 years of college education. We do all of our recordings in front of live audiences because, as I mentioned, you got to hear the same message 16 times to get all of it. And the only way I'm going to get you to listen to it twice is for you to enjoy it. That's the reason every 9 minutes I have you laughing. You know, I tell folks I'm like a cross-eyed discus thrower. Don't set any records, but I do keep the crowd alert. And, you know, I think that is important. When you listen repeatedly, it goes into your subconscious mind. It becomes a part of you. This is going to surprise some of you, since I've been so noisy myself and moving around and whooping and shouting and hollering. But folks, you need to take time to be quiet. You need those silent moments if you're really going to build a winning attitude. One of the reasons I love to jog is because I have those moments of silence right by myself. I feel closer to my God when I'm jogging than at almost any other time. You need the moment of silence alone in a room by yourself, just for yourself, so that you might pray or plan or meditate or do whatever it is that you will. It's during those quiet moments, you see, at Valley Forge that Washington found the strength to lead our country to freedom. It was during those quiet moments that Martin Luther made the translation of the Bible and did other things which have had such an impact on mankind. It was during those quiet moments at Gethsemane that Christ found the strength for His ordeal. You need, ladies and gentlemen, that quiet time with the television set off, the radio off, the record player off, just because you need that time for thinking and reflection. I believe this last generation could aptly be called the noise generation. Noise is destructive and it's very tiring and debilitating. Take some quiet time for yourself. Now let me warn you in advance, when you do all the things that I've been talking about, when you get up in the morning, you know, with a hand slapping, when you say super good but I'll get better, when you answer the telephone enthusiastically, when you feed your mind, when you speak lovingly and optimistically of other people, when you take care of your body, when you are considerate of other people, you do all of these things, there are going to be some people who are going to be critical of you. But let me remind you that since the beginning of time, nobody has ever erected a statue to a critic. There are going to be some people who are going to laugh at you, but let me remind you that the little world laughed, but the big world gathered on the banks of the Hudson River when Fulton went steaming by. The little world laughed, but the big world gathered at Kitty Hawk when the Wright brothers made that historic flight. The little world laughed, but the big world tuned in when Alexander Graham Bell made that historic phone call which changed communications forever. The little world might laugh as you set out on this Born to Win venture, but I want to tell you that you'll be the one who'll be laughing last, because you'll be crossing a finish line as you reach a destination which many people believed you would never make. Yes, you'll get there. And what you get by reaching your destination is important, but not nearly as important as what you will become by reaching your destination. Now, I want to simply say as we go through this, again, I'm not going to tell you it's easy, because I don't think life is. I think life's tough. Oh, but it's so much fun. It's so exciting. It's so rewarding. And you can prepare in advance for the difficulties you're going to encounter. You see, you lay aside money for the rainy day. You can build up an attitude reserve for those rainy days, which happens in many of our lives. You prepare in advance. I happen to be a fan of the fight ring. I've studied the life story of all the heavyweight champions from John L. Sullivan up through Joe Louis. I lost a little interest at that point, but Gene Tunney was one of my favorites. Gene Tunney was a scientific boxer. When he was scheduled to meet Jack Dempsey for the title, most people didn't think he had a chance. But Gene Tunney prepared for the fight by running backwards. Now, does that mean that he was afraid of Dempsey? No. It simply meant that he knew when he got in the ring with Dempsey, he might well get clobbered, and when Dempsey hit you, you were hurt. And so he conditioned himself in sparring sessions and in training sessions and jogging, go backwards, backward, backwards, and when he was hit, then he would automatically do that. Well, you remember the famous long count. When he was knocked down and they started to count, Tunney himself says that he was in complete control of his faculties. And he started to get up, but then he remembered all of the training. You see, every fighter who has ever been in the ring, when he's hurt, really thinks he's all right. And so Tunney wisely stayed down, and he went on, and a lot of people don't realize this, but he knocked Jack Dempsey down in the next round, went on to defend his title successfully for the championship. He had prepared in advance. You see, you are going to encounter some difficulties, and what I want to do is simply to give you a formula so that you can literally be ready for the negatives of life and be prepared to accept all of the good things in life which are in fact going to come your way. Now, there are several steps to it. The first step which you need to follow in this formula is you need to reverse the way you get up. Now, I don't mean that you get out of bed backwards, but I simply mean that you reverse the way you get up. You know how a lot of people get up, the opportunity clock sounds off, and you reach over and maybe you finally find it and you shut it off, and you slap your face a time or two and you say, "Oh, hon, is it time to get up and go to work again?" A lot of people start every day that way. But in the future, you're not going to start that way. You have made a commitment to yourself to take certain steps. And so when that opportunity clock sounds off tomorrow morning, you're going to reach over and you're going to shut it off. Now, I think that's important, And then you're going to sit straight up in bed and you're going to slap your hands and you're going to say, "Oh boy, it's a great day to get out there and get them." Now, I want you to get the scene. Here you are, and you're sitting on the side of your bed. Your hair is down in your eyes. You're slapping your hands if they hit, and you're acting like an 8-year-old child, and you're saying, "Oh boy, it's a good day to get up and get them." Now, let me tell you something. If you live to be 1,000, you'll never tell a bigger one than that one. But two things. First of all, you are up. And that is where you wanted to be when you set that opportunity clock to sound off the next morning. Number two, you are starting to take control of the day instead of letting the day take control of you. Then there's a third thought, you see. You did not decide to get up when you set that opportunity clock the night before. What you do is you decided when you set the clock, "I am going to get up." Now what you're going to do is decide how I'm going to get up at the sound of the clock. You can either get up negatively or you can get up positively. The way I'm talking about now is a very positive way to get up. Now, I don't recommend you do this for a lifetime, but I will say that if you'll do it for 21 days, you will begin to experience some rather exciting things which will be happening in your life. And I want to also say that you are digging just an awful lot deeper than you realize. You see, when you sow an action, you reap a habit. When you sow a habit, you reap a character. And when you sow a character, ladies and gentlemen, you reap a destiny. William James, the father of American psychology, long ago said that if you really want a change in your life, you got to do it flamboyantly and you got to do it immediately. And this idea of getting up in the morning is the greatest procrastination killer you have ever seen. But the exciting thing is, if you understand anything at all about human nature and about habits, is this. Every destructive habit known to man, regardless of what that habit might be, whether it's obesity, profanity, promiscuity, alcoholism, drugs, or whatever, if the habit is a destructive one, it starts very slowly and very gradually, and before you realize you've got the habit has got you. My good friend Dr. Forrest Hunter at UCLA, who in my mind is the #1 drug authority in this country, for example, has said that when we solve the smoking problem, we will eliminate the drug problem. And he says that because, you see, 95+% of the kids who smoke pot started with cigarettes. And 99% of those people who go into heroin and into cocaine smoked pot along the way. So he says that if you eliminate the cigarettes, you eliminate the drug problem. Well, what I'm talking about there is a very similar thing. Your destructive habits start slowly, but your good habits are the opposite. If it's a good habit, you got to grab onto it and hang on to it for dear life. Whether it's tithing or being nice to people or getting up in the morning, if you've had the other habit ingrained otherwise, you need to grab it, and you need to grab it very firmly and vigorously. Now let me also say that if you've got a full-length mirror in front of you, then this one has a double benefit, because there you are looking in the mirror at such a ridiculous sight as you'll ever see. And you can't look in that mirror at yourself with your hair all down in your eyes, acting like an 8-year-old, and keep a straight face to save your life. Now, if you're married, you and your mate both do it. Now you've got a double comedy in living color. And I'll tell you, it really will do some things for you. So as you look at this idea of getting started that way, when you go in for breakfast of that morning, then what you need to do, regardless of what the mate might have prepared for you, you need to smile and simply say, "Honey, do you mean to tell me that we had bacon and eggs and grits for breakfast this morning? That's what I was hoping you would have." Even if you've had that breakfast for 287 consecutive days, then you need to do that. Yes, when you sow that action, you begin to do an awful lot of things. You put the good stuff in, as Diane Morgan sang earlier, and you get the good stuff out. Now, step number 2, if you're going to build that winning attitude with this formula, is you need to establish some symbols in life. A long time ago, John Shedd, a great sales manager, said, "We don't need to be told, but we do need to be reminded." And so with this in mind, on every corner, it seems to me, in every city in America, they have some signals. Now, some people call them red lights, some call them stoplights, some call them traffic lights, but ladies and gentlemen, you and I know what they are. They are go lights. And they're put there for the express purpose of making traffic go. And if you don't believe that, you just watch what happens when one of them is cut off, Traffic backs up for blocks around. Not because the stoplight is off, but because the go light is off. Then why do people call them stoplights, red lights, and traffic lights? It's because they're SNIOPs. A SNIOP, S-N-I-O-P, a person who is susceptible to the negative influence of other people. Now, here's what you got to keep in mind. 27 hours every year, the average American sits there in front of the go lights, waiting on the right color. Now, I know none of you folks in this filming would do a thing like this, or even those of you who are watching this film later on would do it. But have you ever pulled up to one of the go lights, and you're sitting there waiting, and you're going to, as I say, spend 27 hours a year doing that, but you noticed out of the side of your eyes, there's some dude sitting over there, and he's too waiting on the go light, but he's got a good firm grip on that steering wheel. I mean, he doesn't want that car to go anywhere. And then you notice he's got his mouth all fixed in case he has to talk to that thing. And then you watch him, he's got his foot on his accelerator, he's racing the engine to change the color of the light. Now, folks, if you think it's juvenile to get up in the morning and slap your hands and say, "Oh boy, it's a great day to get up and get at them," what do you think it is to race the motor to change the color of the light? Now, I got news. That's just not going to work for you. Here's what you're going to do. From here on in, every time you pull up in front of one of those go lights, you're going to sit there and you're going to visualize it as being your own with your name on it. It's put there for me so I can go more smoothly, more safely, and more quickly to my destination. And, you know, when you're talking to people about directions, how do you go from one side of town to another? You're going to say to them, you go down to the first go light, and you turn left. And I'll tell you what I'll bet you. I'll bet you can't say go light with a straight face to save your life. And the minute you say go light, you're going to be brought right back to this film presentation. And it's going to remind you about a whole lot of things. And that's what it's all about. As I said earlier, you don't need to be told. You do need to be reminded. Have a close friend named Bernie Loftic. He's really more like a brother. Lives up in Winnipeg, Canada. Most positive man I've ever seen in my life. Bernie is so positive he's never once had a cold. Occasionally he does have a warm. He's so positive, he never even talks about the weekend. He calls it the strong end. And you might think to yourself, now Ziglar, wait just a minute. Hand slapping, go lights, warm, strong end, is all of that necessary? No. You can be mediocre without it. You might say, mediocre, I'll have you know I'm president of my company. Mediocre, I'll have you know I'm worth over $1 million. Mediocre, I've got my PhD. Mediocre, I'll have you know I led the entire sales force. Well, bully for you. You see, success is not measured by what you do in competition with others. You might have 10 times their ability. Success is measured by what you do as compared to what you are capable of doing.
Here's Master Motivator, Zig Ziglar.
I want to emphasize a point in our seminar today, and that simple as this. You were born to win. But in order to be the winner you were born to be, you must plan to win, you've got to prepare to win, and you must expect to win. And if you don't plan to win, and if you don't prepare to win, then you have no legitimate reason for expecting to win. That's what today is about. That's what the seminar is about. Planning to win and preparing to win and building within you that legitimate expectancy based on realistic observations, facts, and procedures that if you'll take the first 2 steps, you have every right to expect to win and become the winner you were born to be. I want to establish something here that's very important. Matter of fact, we'll build this seminar around 3 basic premises, and that simply is that you are what you are and where you are because of what's gone into your mind. Now, you can change what you are. You can change where you are by changing what goes into your mind. I want to emphasize that because that is an extraordinarily important part of what we go through. Now, I want to also tie to that the fact that life is a long series of choices. And if we make enough of the right choices, we will end up with the right results. For example, for 24 years of my adult life, by choice, I weighed well over 200 pounds. Now, the reason I say by choice is simply because I have never accidentally eaten anything. It's always been by choice. And if I choose to eat too much today, then I have chosen to weigh too much tomorrow. If I choose to get drunk tonight, then I have chosen to feel miserable tomorrow. Every choice has an end result. Now, you see, we can choose what we put into our mind. And when we choose the right thing to put in our mind, we have chosen the right thinking. We then have chosen the right actions, and the right action produces winners, ladies and gentlemen. Let me share something with you to emphasize the importance of input and expectancy in your mind. We teach a seminar in Dallas. It's called Literally Born to Win. People come from all over the world to attend. We had a young man there a couple of years ago named Samuel Akwasi Sarpong. Now, he's from the Ashanti tribe in the nation of Ghana. In his land, they name the babies, the children, based on the day of the week on which they're born. The fact that his name was Aquasi, now they have a couple of other names too. The fact that his name was Aquasi indicates that he was born on Sunday. Now, that simply in his language means godly, gentle, kind, and peace-loving. By coincidence, this young man was a Christian minister. Those who are born on Wednesday are named Kwaku. Now, Kwaku means mean, violent, aggressive, quick-tempered. By the strangest of coincidences, over 50% of all of the crime committed in the nation of Ghana is committed by those who are born on Wednesday. Sociologists say the only explanation they have is the fact that an expectancy is set up in the minds of the parents. Can't you just visualize the scene? Mom and Dad get the good news. They're going to have a baby. Can't you hear them just talking? Well, boy, I'm sure glad we're going to have us a baby, but boy, I hope that kid doesn't get here on Wednesday. And then can't you imagine little Kwaku shows up, and the first time he drops the ball, can't you just hear old Dad saying, well, what do you expect? A kid is born on Wednesday. Expectancy, which is set up in the mind, is so critically important. Now, we all might laugh and say, yeah, but Zig, that was in the Ashanti tribe in Africa, thousands of miles away. Let me tell you something interesting about America. Did you know? According to Wendell Johnson in his book, People in Quandaries, that in America there's not a single full-blooded Indian on a reservation who stutters. That's right. Now here's another interesting little thing. In the Indian languages and dialects, there is not a word, nor is there a substitute word for stutter. And if there's not a word for stutter, how are you going to stutter? You kind of snicker a little bit and you say, well, that's kind of cute, Ziglar, but what's that dude trying to tell me? Here's what I'm trying to tell you. Words paint pictures. Then the mind goes to work to complete the picture. Now, that's the reason the words you use, the language you use are so important, because of those pictures. For example, think of the picture that's painted in the mind of a child when the parent calls him stupid. Do you really think that makes them any smarter? Or does it have exactly the opposite effect? You're absolutely right. Bill Glass, good friend of mine. Bill is the former All-Pro end for the Cleveland Browns. And Bill does a lot of work in the prisons in America today. And he says that over 90% of the men and women who are incarcerated in our prisons today were repeatedly told by their parents, one of these days, you are going to end up in jail. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thousands of years ago, the Bible said, as ye sow, so also shall you reap. Then the computer people came along in modern times and made it 100% negative. Garbage in, garbage out. Well, our seminar is a positive one, and so what I want to say to you is the same truth, and that is if you put the good stuff in, you're going to get the good stuff out. To me, that's exciting. You are what you are and where you are because of what's gone into your mind. You can change what you are. You can change where you are by changing what goes into your mind. I will say some things a number of times today because repetition is the mother of learning and it is the father of action, making it the architect of accomplishment. I just love what Dr. Tony Campola of Eastern College in Pennsylvania says. Dr. Campola says, and I'm absolutely in agreement with him, Dr. Campola says over and over that your past is important because it has brought you to where you are. But as important as your past is, as it relates to your present, it is not nearly as important as the way you see your future. You see, ladies and gentlemen, the way you see your future determines your thinking today. Your thinking today determines your performance today. And your performance today determines your future. But hey, did you hear what else Dr. Campola said? Dr. Campola said, look, I understand about your past. I understand that you've had a bankruptcy. I understand that you've had a failed marriage. I understand that you've been chemically dependent. I understand that you were abused as a child. I understand all of those things. But let me say it over and over and over. That is in the past. And I want to say this a number of times. Failure is an event. It is not a person. Think of all of the times that Babe Ruth struck out. Think of all the incomplete passes that Roger Staubach threw. Think of all the sales that a super salesperson has missed, whether they live here in Salt Lake or Portland or Kansas City or Yazoo City. We've missed a lot of sales. So what? Failure is an event. It is not a person. In my own life, I was stone broke at age 45. My dad died when I was 5 years old. It was the heart of the Depression. I'd worked hard all of my life. I had been selling on the street since I was 8 years old. I was milking cows by the time I was 8 years old. We survived only because we had a mother with an enormous amount of faith and the capacity for a lot of hard work, an enormous amount of wisdom. I was milking those cows at age 8, and I know we got some city slickers watching this, so let me tell you something about cows. They don't give milk. I mean, you got to fight for every drop. Now, I don't know what you can do with that information, but that's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to give you information, then you use it as you see fit. Let me tell you what my good friend John Maxwell from San Diego, California says. John Maxwell says, and again I believe he's right, that if there is hope in the future, there is power in the present. Everything I do as an individual and everything we do as a company is to give you hope in that future. But at the same time, I've got to be absolutely candid with you and say to you that if you expect to win, you've got to understand the second principle that I will be espousing repeatedly today. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is that life is tough. I don't know what your experience with it has been. I don't know what you've discovered as you've gone about in the game of life. But I want you to clearly understand that life is tough. I want you to hear it over and over that whether you're a student in school, a salesperson, a household executive, whether you're in the military, the government, or whatever you do, life is tough. But even more significantly, I want you to clearly understand that when you're tough on yourself, life is going to be infinitely easier on you. I just want you to understand that you got to be before you can do, and you got to do before you can have. Now, the reason I emphasize that is this. The average 20-year-old American has witnessed 1 million television commercials. That's 50,000 a year. That's 1,000 a week. And those commercials, primarily 30 to 60 second ones, repeatedly say, you know, everything has a 30-second or a 60-second solution, but that's not what life is all about. The songs of today frequently sing, I want to be free. But folks, let me tell you something. You take the train off the tracks, it's absolutely free, but it cannot go anywhere. You take the steering wheel out of the automobile, it's under the direction and control of no one, but it can't go anywhere. Unless we take control, unless we set the direction in our life, then, ladies and gentlemen, if we do go anywhere, it's under the direction of someone else. This seminar primarily is going to share with you some thoughts as to how you can move to the top. But you got to understand, again, you got to be before you can do, and you got to do before you can have. Life is tough, But I'll say it again, when you're tough on yourself, life is going to be infinitely easier on you. It was January the 23rd, 1981. It was a Friday. It had been one of those weeks. I had been literally drove hard and hung up wet, as we'd say down home. I mean, I'd been about as busy as a man can get. That particular Friday morning, we had a 4-hour recording session. Now, when you record, you got to move it up a notch because you don't have your body language and your eye contact to communicate. It's got to be all voice. So I was full speed ahead, wide open, 280 words a minute with gust up to 550. I mean, it was all there. Well, at the end of the 4 hours, I wasn't just whipped, I was whooped. And there is, as I say, quite a difference in the two. We had a flight going back to Dallas, leaving at 3 o'clock. The airlines had said to us, now because you've got all of this gear, you need to get out here at least an hour early so we can secure it. So straight up and down at 1 o'clock when I finished, my son-in-law, Chad Whitmire, who works with me, packed up all of the gear as quickly as possible. We caught a cab, made a mad dash to the airport, got out there straight up and down 2 o'clock. As I walked in the front door, there were 2 humongous lines. And I picked out the one which I thought was the shortest and prepared to wait. But I noticed after I'd been there just a moment or so that a little lady was walking around behind the counter. And I looked on one end and there was a sign which said position closed. My experience told me that pretty soon position closed was going to swing open over to position open. So I got ready. I wanted to be the first in that new line. And sure enough, about a minute later, down comes position closed, up goes position open, and the little lady looked out at the 2 long lines of people and smilingly said, those of you who have a seat on the 3 o'clock flight to Dallas, come over here. Well, quick like a bunny rabbit, I'll tell you, I was over there, first in line. Little lady looked at me and grinned as she said, the 3 o'clock flight to Dallas has been canceled. I said, fantastic. She said, what'd you say? I said, fantastic. She said, now I got to ask you, I've just told you your flight's been canceled and you say it's fantastic. Now, why would you say a thing like that? And I said, ma'am, it's very simple. There are only 3 reasons on the face of this earth why anybody would ever cancel a flight to Dallas, Texas. I said, number 1, something must be wrong with that airplane. Or number 2, something must be wrong with the man going to fly that airplane. Or number 3, something must be wrong with the weather that man going to fly that airplane in. Now, if either one of those 3 situations exist, I don't want to be up there. I want to be right down here. Fantastic. She said, yeah, but the next flight doesn't leave until 6:05. I said, fantastic. Well, by now the other 2 long lines of people are looking over as if to say, who is that nut that says everything is fantastic? So I said, ma'am, as she responded to me rather by saying, why would you say it's fantastic when I tell you that you're going to have a 4-hour wait here in the airport in Kansas City? I said, ma'am, it's very simple. I said, I am 54 years old, and never before, not even once in my entire lifetime, have I ever had a chance to spend 4 solid hours in this airport here in Kansas City, Missouri. And I said, do you realize at this precise moment, there literally are tens of millions of people on the face of this earth who not only are cold, but who also are hungry? And here I am in one of the most beautiful facilities in the whole world, bitterly cold outside, but nice and warm on the inside. And there's a nice coffee shop right down the way. Going to go down there, get myself a cup of coffee, going to do some relaxing for just a few minutes. Then I've got some critically important writing which I must get done. And who can think of a better place than a beautiful facility like this for me to do my creative work? I say it's fantastic. Now, those of you who might have picked up just on this particular segment of the Born to Win program might be thinking to yourself, well, I've heard about those positive thinkers, but that's ridiculous, Ziglar. Now, you might also be wondering to yourself, I wonder if he really said that. Tell me the truth, Ziglar. Is that really what you said? Well, as we'd say down home, scouts, honor folks, that is exactly what I said. Okay, you said it now. Tell me this. Is that the way you felt? I mean, did you really feel that way? Tell me the truth, Ziglar. Did you feel that way? Well, of course not. At least initially, I did not feel that way. But you see, folks, as your instructor in the Born to Win program will tell you many, many different times in many, many different ways, whether you respond or react is going to determine just how high you're going to go in the game of life. You see, to respond is positive. To react is negative. I chose to respond for one or two or three very simple reasons. You see, I don't have ulcers. I don't want ulcers. I don't need ulcers. I honestly don't think I will ever have ulcers because I respond instead of react. You see, you go to the doctor and you're sick and he gives you a prescription and says, see me tomorrow. And if you go back the next day and he begins to shake his head and say, uh-oh, your body is reacting to the medicine, then everybody gets upset. But if he looks at you and says, oh boy, your body is responding to this medicine, then you're really going to get excited because you know it's doing you some good. You see, folks, you do good when you respond, but you're not doing so good when you react. You see, I responded for that reason. Now, I had a couple of reactions I actually could have had. You know, I could have gotten pretty sarcastic when she told me that the next flight didn't leave until 6:05 or that my flight had been canceled. I could have said, that's great. That's just great. I break my silly neck running through all this traffic trying to get out here, you know, to catch a plane as you had told me to do, expecting it to leave, and I get here and you tell me that you've canceled a flight. Well, let me tell you something. When I drove up, I noticed that you've got a dozen airplanes sitting out there not doing a cotton-picking thing. Now, why can't you let me get on one of those and go down to Dallas? Why can't you do that? Just answer that question. I could have done that. And the next flight still leaves at 6:05. Now, folks, let me tell you something. There are some things you just are not going to change. If you're black, you're going to stay black. If you're white, you're going to stay white. You're not going to add 1 cubit. I don't care how much you think about it to your height. You're not going to change who your parents were or where you were born. You're not going to change a thing which has happened in the past. That is over and done with. But the question is, do you respond to situations and make them positive, or do you react, which is negative? See, I could have had another reaction. I could have ranted and raved and whooped and shouted and snorted and screamed and hollered. I could have gotten obnoxious and made a complete idiot out of myself right then and there. I could have said, that's crazy. Who's a dum-dum that made such an idiotic decision anyhow? I want to go to Dallas. I've been gone all week long. My family misses me and I miss my family. Let me see the man who made this dumb decision. I want to see him right now. I could have done that. And the next flight still leaves at 6:05. I know that many of you are very familiar with what happened when our president was shot in 1981. You know what happened at the sound of the gunshot, and I'm absolutely convinced he is alive today because the men who had been assigned to guard his life responded in a very positive way. At the sound of the gunshot, they instantly moved him into the back seat of the limousine and they sped off to the hospital. And it's only been in the last few months that we have learned that we came within a whisper of losing our president. The way our president himself responded to me said a whole lot about the man himself. You remember the scene? He was there in excruciating pain. He was absolutely almost in shock. His wife was there scared to death. The television cameras were on him, and he looked at her and smilingly said, honey, I just forgot to duck. And 200 million Americans said, atta boy, Ron, there's my president. I learned more about him in 2 minutes than I'd learned about him in many, many years by watching him respond. You see, I could watch you for 6 months or a year or 2 years, follow you around and watch everything you do, and I could learn a whole lot about you. But the truth of the matter is, I can watch you under adverse circumstances for 2 minutes. And I can learn as much about you when the pressure is on, when things are not going well, when things are tough. I can learn more about you in 2 minutes than I can normally by watching you for days and weeks and months. Do you respond or do you react? Suppose at the sound of the gunshot, those men assigned to protect the president's life, suppose one of them had said, Did you hear that? Well, wonder what that was, you know. And suppose the president, suppose he said, oh no, here I am 70 years old, I've worked all of my life for this job, and now 68 days after I get it, somebody shoots me, it's not fair. You see, the way you respond is important. Do you respond or do you react? You see, the truth of the matter is, I did not know a single soul at that big old airline. I mean, not a one. Didn't know the president or the chairman of the board or the ticket agent or a single stewardess. And as far as I was concerned, though it was their airline, they could literally cancel my flight. But there's no way they're going to cancel my day. You see, the day is mine. As a matter of fact, God Himself gave it to me. He even told me to rejoice in this specific day. No, I'm going to let them cancel my flight because it's their airline. I'm not going to let them cancel my day because it belongs to me to use productively. You see, I don't know if you've ever been guilty of this, but I know some people, you know, maybe they're riding down the freeway on the way to their job in the morning, you know, neither thinking negative or positive. I mean, they're just kind of in neutral, and all of a sudden some idiot pulls right in front of them, and they hit their brakes and the horn all at the same time, and they shake their fist, you know, I mean, they really get after them. Why don't you watch where you're going, you dumb bunny? I could have been killed. Not only do they proceed to give them a piece of their mind there, but when they get down to the office, they rant and they rave and they whoop and they shout and they snort and they scream and they holler and they just carry on. Why don't they make people around here get licenses that don't know how to drive here? I mean, this is wild. This is crazy. Hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, they still talking about the dodo that pulled in front of them. And in the meantime, the man who committed the dastardly deed rides merrily along, completely unaware of the fact that you even exist. But He is in complete control of your life, telling you how to think and how to act and how to feel, affecting your attitude with your fellow employees and affecting your productivity tremendously. And you see, folks, that's just not a good idea. That's one of the reasons we're going to get into a formula here in a few minutes about what you can do to build an attitude formula or a foundation so solidly that when somebody does rain on your parade, when things don't go exactly like you want them to go, your attitude is still going to be good. Now, we've got lots to overcome because, you know, this started a long time ago. It really started in the Garden of Eden. You remember the scene. God had given Adam and Eve, I mean, absolutely everything, paradise. He said, now you can have it all except there's one tree that has some fruit on it. You can't eat it. Well, you know the story. They ate the fruit. Then the Lord came walking in the garden that evening, and as I said earlier, this conversation is not going to be verbatim. But the Lord came walking in the garden, you know, and He said, Adam, where are you? Over here, Lord. Adam, did you eat that fruit? Simple question. He doesn't want a theological answer, just wants yes or no. But you know what Adam said? He said, Lord, let me tell you about that woman. The Lord said, Eve, did you eat that fruit? Simple question. Yes or no is all He wants. But Eve said, Lord, let me tell you about that serpent. And of course, the serpent didn't have a leg to stand on. Now, you know, what I'm going to say to you is that you don't have a leg to stand on either. When you blame other things and other people for your difficulty, I want to simply say to you that you can learn to respond instead of reacting. And that really is what this segment of Born to Win is all about. I want to tell you that every action is preceded by a thought. And every thought is preceded by input into your mind. So you see, when you control the input, you control the thoughts which control your action.